a founder's job is not the same as a CEO's job. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people confuse the two. They think I'm a founder and CEO because I'm at the helm of the company. And ultimately, your responsibilities and what you're doing is two completely different things. I don't enjoy being a CEO. I enjoy being a founder because it's a very different ballgame. CEO's role is accountable to the execution of the vision. Let's be very disciplined with how we approach and grow the company. A founder is someone who ultimately creates. It's somebody who loves to play in a sandbox and come up with new things and have these big, bold visions and ideas of what we could potentially do.
Welcome to the CTRL ALT GAB podcast, where we sit down with tech founders to break down how they scale, pivot, and grow. I'm your host, Gabrielle Walthers. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for another episode of the CTRL ALT GAB podcast. I am joined by the founder of Funnelytics, the wonderful Mikael. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk about everything Funnelytics, your growth journey so far, and yourself. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. To kick things off, I really am curious what inspired you to start your founding journey with Funnelytics and what led you to this specific space and to solve this specific problem for marketers. Just walk us through the origin story there.
Yeah, no problem. I started learning and diving into marketing out of university, and because I wanted to sell t-shirts originally, and I had a t-shirt company and I didn't know how to sell to strangers. I wanted to learn, how do I sell online? So that's how it originally started. And I dove really, really deep into this world of how do you sell online? Like, how do you get a random person who's never heard of you before, never seen your t-shirts before, get them to pull out their credit card and actually pay you money? And I kind of became obsessed about it. And I think the reason I became obsessed about it was because I really didn't like my job at the time. The internet back in 2009, 2008, 2010, whenever you would Google something, you'd get all sorts of stuff that would pop up in terms of what you could see. And same thing with Facebook. You'd see some advertising on Facebook, even though Facebook was relatively young. It led me down this rabbit hole of making money online. Like, do you want to make $10,000 from the beach? It's like, yeah, I do. I don't want to do this job. I want to make $10,000 from my laptop on a beach. And I fell down that rabbit hole of learning about this stuff. And a lot of people think that stuff is scammy. Of course it is. It is obviously crafted and written in a way to touch on your desires and all that stuff. With some of those programs and some of those courses, it really made me understand, how does the marketing game work? Like, how do you actually get a stranger to become a customer for a product, a service, whatever? And I just, like I said, became obsessed with it. I started learning about SEO, and I started learning about pay-per-click advertising and affiliate marketing and building websites and funnels and emails and customer and buyer psychology and basically copywriting and all of this stuff. And I just started really wanting to figure out how to do it. And I got my first break, or my first success, believe it or not, running a Mandarin language school in London, UK. And no, I don't speak Mandarin, and no, I've never been to China, but I still started a Mandarin school, and we were able to grow it. I was able to build basically some marketing funnels that attracted people who wanted to learn Mandarin, and our funnels were able to convert them into clients, students for our school. And we grew that business, and we were able to exit that business. And it kind of gave me the confidence that, man, if I can do this for Mandarin, I can probably do this for anybody, any business. So I started an agency to do this for clients, to basically build the marketing funnels, customer acquisition engines, ways to help them convert strangers into customers to some degree. I know this is kind of a long-winded story here, but one of the problems I kept facing was people didn't really understand what I meant when I talked about customer acquisition engines. They didn't really understand what I meant when I talked about funnels and a system to convert strangers into customers. Theoretically, it kind of made sense, but it was still very abstract. And what I would do is I would actually map the system. I went on Fiverr. I got little icons made of like Facebook and little page icons, and I would basically put it on a PowerPoint presentation and show them, like, Facebook is going to go to this page, and on this page we're going to get that person's email, and And then they're going to get these 5 emails and it's going to go to this sales page and so on and so forth, and basically visualize that strategy for them. And that became the foundation of Funnelytics. And then the evolution of Funnelytics became, man, I need to visualize the data. I need to show them, is this working or is it not? We wanted to be able to overlay data on top of that same map, that same strategy. And fundamentally, that is what Funnelytics is. It's a canvas that allows you to visualize your marketing strategy, but it is powered by data. So you can go and overlay the numbers and see how many people went from this page to that page, and conversion rates, and what flows people took to get to a purchase, and where those bottlenecks are in this really cool visual way.
Definitely. That's very cool. I mean, coming from a marketing-based company, it's very easy to see where a lot of breakdown happens throughout the course of folks' sales cycle, and being able to have, accurate KPIs at each step so you can see where it's breaking down. A lot of that stuff, when it's not automated or not posted in a efficient space, can be such a time suck. So it makes total sense being in the market or being in a solopreneur space, being like, all right, how does this even happen? Like, how do we even, starting from the beginning and then forging your own path and being like, I want to create this from what I think is going to work, not what's already happening in the industry. So this is a bit more technical, and that's not really the point of the show, but I'm just curious, are the integrations like for Funnelytics? Are folks able to connect all of their various different softwares running all these various different campaigns? Does Funnelytics kind of replace those? What does that piece look like? Like, how one-stop shoppy is it for folks?
So good question. And basically, I want you to think of Funnelytics as a replacement in a sense for Google Analytics, right? So
Gotcha.
you install Funnelytics as a tracking script across your website. We start tracking people. The difference is we actually then integrate your Google ads, your Facebook ads. You then can integrate your HubSpot, your Shopify, basically your external platforms that can pass data back into Funnelytics and tie it back to that user profile. So basically, somebody comes to your website, we identify them as user ABCXYZ, and user ABCXYZ visited this page, then went over to this page, and we're just keeping track of that entire journey. They came from Facebook and did this. Eventually, user ABCXYZ fills out a form, and now they're no longer user ABC, they're Gabrielle at whatever email address, and now all of a sudden, anything that happens in Shopify or Stripe or HubSpot, we can pull that data back and tie it back to that same profile. And now we can visualize it on the canvas to better understand how many people are moving from this page to this page, right?
The customer behavior and
Exactly.
where the success is. Yeah. And if they're only visiting, certain ads, clicking on certain links,
You
visiting
got
certain
it.
pages. Very cool. Nice. I think accessibility to that insight is very critical. You're definitely onto something. You're like,
Appreciate
I
it.
hope so. Like, that's the point. So walk me through what acquiring your first few customers looked like in the early days. I'm sure that you powered your own external facing content and website and ads and all that stuff powered by the company that you created. I think that probably is going to make a pretty sick user case for Funnelytics, but I'm curious what that for the first few customer acquisitions looked like for you, and the types of companies that you're going after beyond just anyone that would have a use for it. I know you're mentioning like marketers and stuff like that, but is there any other group of people, any other specifications for people that you're really targeting this towards?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved a lot over the years. So I launched Funnelytics in 2018, and back then it was really free mapping tool with like a lifetime version of the analytics, because it kind of didn't work, the analytics. Like, it worked, but not really. And we launched the 2.0 version of the analytics in 2022. That's when it really became much more of a performance tool. While in the early days, it was much more of a mapping and visualization tool. So how did I get my first customers? I can tell you high level, or I can get very, very tactical and tell you exactly how we got our first customers. So which one do you want?
How about somewhere in the middle with a little bit of the technical piece so that you can really speak to the functionality of Funnelytics, but then also in a way that folks that aren't experts in the field will understand, just to give you even more complicated answer. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Now I got to find the balance. All right. So when I launched Funnelytics, we basically had this mapping canvas, right? This way to visualize the customer journey, the funnels, whatever you want. It has all these icons. So think of it like a Miro or any sort of diagramming tool, but with marketing icons. And I decided in the early days to just give that away for free. So basically, people could sign up to this free mapping tool because the vision was always the analytics, to be able to overlay data on top. I figured if I can get people in and using the mapping tool, a percentage of them would want to then put the numbers on top to see if it's working, right? Logic, I guess. But basically, I used Facebook ads to drive people to this free mapping tool. I funded those Facebook ads through my agency. My agency was doing relatively well, and I invested, I think, around $10,000-ish dollars. Got about 6,000 people to sign up to the free mapping tool over the course of 2 months. And I pushed all of those people, or as many as I could, into a Facebook group. And that Facebook group is where I started communicating and being the face, basically, just recording a bunch of videos, content, doing a lot of lives, like Facebook Lives, and just trying to give value to the audience because I didn't really know what I was building. I just knew I had this vision. I didn't know if there were agencies in there, if they were small businesses, if they were ClickFunnels, Russell Brunson crowd. I just didn't really know. So in the Facebook group, I would always post and engage with them. And about 2 months after I launched that first ad, we had 6,000 people sign up to the mapping tool. About 3,000 people were in the Facebook group. And then I opened up the cart to a first lifetime access to the Funnelytics Pro, which was the analytics layer on top of the mapping tool. I remember, I think the time it was like $600, $595 one time for it, right? And I had no clue what would happen. And we ended up generating about 300 people signed up within 48 hours. I ended up making about $200,000+ in 48 hours after I first opened it up because I'd given so much value in the Facebook group. I was constantly doing trainings and talking about how I'm running my agency and all sorts of stuff. And of course, I gave them a free mapping tool that people loved. It kind of started taking off from there. That's how we got our first customers. And we kept pushing that for 2018, 2019, until we really pivoted and transformed into a traditional SaaS model with, monthly fees and yearly fees and all that.
Yeah, that's very cool. What a unique strategy. I think that Facebook group piece is really interesting. A very focused way to leverage that founder-based, education-based marketing and brand awareness building. Not a strategy I've heard or seen a lot of other folks doing. I think that's definitely something that's probably separates you guys from a lot of other folks trying to tackle similar things. With that group of 3,000 to 6,000 early adopters, I'm curious, after rolling it out with them, getting them access to the free tool, did your product change much after that? Like, did you get really valuable feedback? Did you systematize getting that feedback back from them? Were they used similar to a group of pilot folks where based on their behavior on the app, certain things would change and stuff like that? How did that look? Did a lot of changes come from that? Or were you kind of like, you know what, we nailed it. This is exactly functioning the way that probably not. It's rarely
No,
the case, but I wanted to give you the opportunity in case you're like, you know what, we actually crushed it out the gate. Everything was perfect.
no, nothing was perfect. It actually was really, really bad. But no, you know what? I'd never built a software before, right? So I didn't know a lot of the nuances of building a software. I didn't know the ins and outs of building a software. And it's really not that simple to build software. The problem with software is that it's this upfront investment for something that may or may not work, right? Like there's always ways to test MVPs and all that stuff and build prototypes, etc. But until you really get it in the hands of people, and it has to kind of work in order for it to get in the hands of people, you don't really know how they're going to use it. And one of the challenges, and if I'm being completely transparent with myself to be self-aware, is I had a very clear vision of what I wanted for this software. And that vision, I think, clouded a lot of my judgment based on user feedback because I prioritized feedback that was aligned with my vision more so than feedback that was aligned with what the market was really telling me.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You see a bunch of feedback and you're like, this one lines up with what I want. This one lines
Yeah.
up with what I
A little bit
want.
of self-fulfilling prophecy there. You're
Exactly.
like,
It's
I
like,
don't
oh,
need to
people
exact
want what I
what you said.
want. Meanwhile, there's like one message out of like 2,000 that is actually what you want. It's like, let's put
Yeah,
that
we'll
one up to
focus
the
on this
top.
one thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was me just being very naive, especially because when we first launched, it had such a big response and we made a bunch of money and it was growing. I almost thought that like, oh, I know what the hell I'm doing. I know what people want. The famous quote from Henry Ford, if you would have asked people back then what they would have wanted, they would have said faster horses, not cars. Well, that was kind of my thought process. It's like people don't really know what they want. I know what they want. So let me just build it. The problem there too was because we were getting people using a mapping tool, which every type of marketer in the world wants to visualize their strategy. It's an easy way to explain. It really made it very, very difficult for us to decide what do we build next? Because we were getting feedback from all sorts of people. We were getting feedback from agencies, from small businesses, I remember the VP of growth at Microsoft signed up to our free mapping tool and was using it. And we were getting so much. We had coaches who were using it in their courses, and basically everyone was giving us feedback, and that feedback was very widespread that I almost ignored the feedback and just kept building my vision. But
Yeah.
my vision didn't necessarily always align with the actual market.
Yeah, I can see the loop that you locked yourself into a little bit with the selective feedback acceptance. But that's an interesting point you bring up, because I think a lot of people make that mistake where they toss away feedback that isn't what they think in line with their vision, but they're failing to recognize that if that feedback's coming from a group of users that is going to be, primary users, that is, you need to make it for the people that it's designed for too.
Yeah, the one thing I will say to that is I think the problem that I was facing in the early days of Funnelytics, it's changed now. It's evolved very, very much now. But in the early days, I didn't even know who I was building it for. Ultimately, I
Mhm.
was building it for me and the way I was running my agency, which was a very specific process, right?
Mhm.
Like I would map out a strategy for a client, then I would usually put fake numbers to forecast if these are the numbers that hit, here's how much money we'd make or our profit. And then I would actually launch the strategy and try to see what are the actual numbers in comparison to. So I basically built it with that mindset of like, well, this is the flow that I go through. Let me make every agency go through this same flow, or let me make every business think about it the same way, as opposed to basically saying, what is the one use case that this is really, really for? And why are people using? What is the job to be done in a sense? And that ultimately was the challenge in the early days of deciding how do we build funnels. And it caused a lot of churn. It made it very, very hard for us to grow. We made money, but it made it very hard for us to scale. Even to this day, it's impacted us significantly in terms of our potential.
That group of early adopters is interesting to me, because having it be just organically the folks that would be interacting with your external facing content, with your ads or your site or anything like that. Obviously, you're going to get folks from agencies, but also businesses from any vertical that take on that marketing piece and hold the funnel internally. And so based on the feedback you got from that group of people, did that impact who your ICP is now and the folks that typically are giving you the most traction? Like, did that accidentally or consequentially tailor it to even niche down, like a further niche down group of people, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and it took a long time. I'm not gonna lie. Like it took a long time to basically get there. And I'm talking about a few years to get ourselves there because we basically had to systematically look at the data in terms of where's our best customers, which ones are the ones who are using it the most, who are sticking the most, what are they using it for, which ones are the ones who are willing to pay us more money versus the ones who aren't willing to pay us more money. And that required a lot of data, and that data requires time and enough users to go through the platform to basically help us make those decisions. And to some degree, it kept kind of lining up with my vision of like, well, what do I want this tool to ultimately be? Like the name is Funnelytics, not funnel map, not funnel forecast. It's an analytics platform by definition. So I also had to weigh the ideas of, okay, we get a lot of requests over here from this user segment. They're willing to pay this dollar amount per month, and they'll stick around for X amount of months, right? And this is kind of the value of this user segment, but there's a lot of them coming in. So for us, that was a mapping crowd, right? Agencies, strategists, where they just want to visualize the tool. And then here's this other segment. Maybe we get a lot less of them. This is what they want. They want analytics. They want integrations. They want more accuracy on the tracking side. The value of them is this. They churn at a higher rate, but the ones who do stick around longer. And the only reason the other ones churn, by the way, for non-SaaS people means just leave, like cancel their subscription. It's because we don't have these core features on the analytics side. And it was this constant battle of where is our sweet spot? And it took a long time to keep narrowing that down.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you started Funnelytics as a personal tool for your own entrepreneurial journey with the t-shirts and stuff like that. And so obviously you've learned so much since conceptualizing what you know now, if you were to start your founder journey over today, what are the biggest things that you would do differently? There'd be less testing and iterating because you have those lessons learned already inside your mind. But what is the biggest thing that you're like, you know what, if we were to start our founder journey today, we would make these two big changes? You are in an interesting position where you became a subject matter expert as you were developing this versus already being, a software developer, a software founder, and then starting a company. I'm curious if you will play the small mind game with me and conceptualize, if you were to start today, what is the biggest thing or biggest things that you do differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is starting off very, very clear and specific as to what is the reason I'm building this software. Like, what is the use case of this software and for who? And as niche as I can make that, the better it is, right? So marketers is too broad. There's creative marketers, there's social media marketers, there's content marketers, there's media buyers, it's too broad, right? Really, really, really honing in on what exactly is the one use case and for what segment is it, and really nailing that to the point where that segment is saying, I love this. This is the best tool to do this one thing. And I want to tell all of my friends who are in the same category to do that, right? One way to look at it is, am I receiving the exact same, almost word for word testimonials of people who get success with with my software? So for example, with Funnelytics, I get people who say, man, this mapping tool is the easiest, fastest way to map my strategy. Then another agency will say, I was able to close a $10,000 client with the mapping tool and the forecasting feature. Another one will say, oh, I saved 10 hours on reporting and gathering data. And what you want to get to is you want to be like, I want people to say this one thing, this one use case. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Shopify store owner. I installed this tool right here and it uncovered an extra 15% in lift in customer acquisition because there was a bottleneck, right? Or it increased my revenue by this, right? And the more specific that is, where every single person looks the same, sounds the same, and says the exact same testimonial, that's when you know you have this product market fit. And then you can expand your vision. Then you can expand and think beyond that. A good example is Uber and how Uber grew. Uber started off as Uber Black in San Francisco, really as a way to pick up people from bars and nightclubs. And it was more of a like luxury. It was an alternative to a taxi, but it wasn't. It was really kind of a black car. That was the use case. It was, you roll up in this black car into the nightclub and you just pick it up and call it from your phone. And that started to take off and it started to work. And then they took Uber Black and went to another city. And then eventually they went and expanded to UberX. And then eventually they went and expanded to Uber Eats. But when you start with, hey, I've got this vision for a ride sharing app that anybody can use, and let's go and make sure that anyone signs up, that's when you get lost in that vision. So that's the number one thing that I would think differently. Otherwise, like, I would still launch a community. I would still basically do the same thing that I did to grow those first 1,000 customers and expand from there. So a lot of the stuff that I did well, but from a software side, it was that.
Yeah. And through that story, you pointed to something interesting that is a pillar of today's marketing tactics. You have to really hone in on a thing, get that singing before you add on more. So if we're talking about a marketing channel, you want to be as focused as you can until you have the analytics to prove that you're nailing that before you're adding on more and more and more. And so applying that principle to other areas of the business is really smart and allows for a more concrete understanding of, the success of, do we have product market fit? So what I'm learning through our conversation that's really cool is that a lot of the principles that people apply to certain sectors of their business and certain operations of their business have value and use other places. Another thing that's cool and unique is the way that you interact and leverage your founder-led marketing. I think the Facebook group is brilliant. And I think it's coming back. I think it was really underutilized there for a while. Refocusing on the social networking side of those older social media platforms is smart, because I think they dropped off for a while there. And so bringing them back, using them for their intended purpose, clearly can have a lot of success. So we're about to wrap up, but I'm curious. I know we've talking in bigger themes on the latter half of the show, but the biggest takeaway, the biggest lessons learned from a founder's perspective for you that you think would be good for other tech founders, tech startups, either in in the marketing space or just at all that you've learned through your journey that you think others would be able to utilize and help them a bit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what I just shared is probably the biggest one. I think another one that's very important is a founder's job is not the same as a CEO's job. I
Mm.
think a lot of people confuse the two, right? They think I'm a founder and CEO because I'm at the helm of the company. And ultimately, your responsibilities and what you're doing is two completely different things. Being a CEO, I'm a terrible CEO. I don't enjoy it. I don't know if my team will agree to that necessarily because I'm good with the team, but I don't enjoy being a CEO. I enjoy being a founder because it's a very different ballgame. CEO's role is basically accountable to the execution of the vision, right? Like let's be very disciplined with how we approach and grow the company. That's why CEOs get paid a lot of money and ultimately they're at the helm of everything. A founder is someone who ultimately creates. It's somebody who ultimately sits back and loves to play in a sandbox and come up with new things and new ideas and have these big, bold visions and ideas of what we could potentially do. Understanding your core skills, understanding where your zone of genius and supplementing that. If you're going to start a software company, another thought is make sure, again, I know a lot of successful people who've done it solo. I'm a solo founder, but it is very, very hard, right? Building a business is not for the faint of heart. It's not easy at all. And when you don't have somebody who is by your side, especially if you don't know anything about code, like I know nothing about it, it can get very, very lonely. And it's always good to have that balance on the founder side.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. I think people are quick to dismiss the human side of being a founder and the journey of starting a company, getting off the ground, getting to market. A founder is, only as good as they allow themselves to be. Making sure you show up for yourself, get yourself everything you need to be able to get through the tough times from a founder perspective is part of it, for sure. Okay, if there's anything you want to plug for Funnelytics, anything coming down the pipe for people to look out for, anything exciting on the horizon, anything like that.
Yeah, and we're still building and it's a lot of fun. And AI is obviously a very, very big part of the world and where it's going. So that's something that we are playing with and having a lot of fun with. But if you are interested in checking out Funnelytics, you can go to funnelytics.io. And if you want to follow me, I've switched my social media of choice over the years from Facebook to LinkedIn. I post most of my content and my thoughts over there. So you can look for me on LinkedIn and we can connect and have a conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Mikael. I appreciate your time today, and we'll catch you guys
Thanks for
next
having
time.
me.
Thank you for listening to the Control Alt Gab podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.